So most of us learn to measure our progress as kids. How tall am I? How fast am I? Can I beat Timmy in an arm wrestle? Well, today we get into that topic. How do I measure my progress in recovery? Welcome aboard.
Guys ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, before we get started, once again, I want to invite you to connect with me. I'm always starting new groups, and I'm also coaching guys individually. I love to connect with people who are taking some of their first steps out of their struggles with pornography. So if that's you, or you want to talk to me about what I have to offer, I'd love to hear from you. My email is bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. And oftentimes guys are coming to a place where they're going, you know what? This is not working on my own. I am not able to pull myself up by the bootstraps. And despite my best efforts, I think I need something to turbocharge my recovery. So if that's you, once again, I'd love you to reach out for me. We have groups for guys, and the best way to connect with them best way to connect with me is to email me once again at bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. Well, let's go back to this idea of measuring our progress. You know, I think it's only natural that we as guys want to know how things are recovering in our, how we are progressing in our walking away from porn. You know, we like progress. I think it's one of the reasons, I guess I'm speaking for guys here, we keep score in our golf game. We want to measure how we're doing. Are we getting better? Right next to our house here is a Frisbee golf course. And I know what my course record is. And I like to keep track. Every time I go out, I like to keep track and measure each round against my personal best. It's just what I do. I'm very competitive. When I was younger, I ran the Sun Run in Vancouver. It's a 10-kilometer run. I think I was in my 30s, in fairly good shape, and I ran the 10 kilometers in 43 minutes and 33 seconds. And I'm pretty proud of that time. I still ask my extended family whenever they do the Sun Run, so what was your time? And to this point, nobody with the last name of Tomke has beat me yet in my extended family. I'm not sure I said if I was competitive or not, but and I thought that's pretty good. I'm a pretty good runner. And then just today I Googled 10K run, and this is what it said. It says a sub 40-minute 10K is a key benchmark for many runners. There's an unwritten rule that below 40 minutes means you have turned into a rather decent runner. And here I am at 43:33, and they're talking sub 40 minutes. Screw Google, what does it know? I know my truth. I'm a rock star. I'm a runner, so leave me alone. Yeah, that competitive stuff, right? But I want to measure myself. And now they're telling me I'm over 40 minutes. I'm not a rather decent runner. I'm rather offended. Progress is important for me, if you haven't noticed. I want to know I'm getting somewhere. Well, on previous podcasts, we've used a number of ideas to communicate how, we will talk about things like progress. We've used terms like building momentum, or we've used terms like tipping point, all around the idea to communicate that we're moving forward, we're finding traction, we're experiencing recovery and progress in our journey. And I think that in this progress, there are some metrics that we may not have thought about as we're going along. I mean, most people, they always think of one metric when it comes to their progress. And that one metric is, guess what? Yeah, you've got it, clean time. Clean time is essentially how many days, hours, weeks, months it has been since I last looked at porn. And the metric of clean time isn't all bad. I mean, we're communicating to ourselves and whatever that this is not something I want. It's not an acceptable part of my life, and I'm taking it seriously and measuring it so that I can usher it out of my life once and for all. So I think that's a noble thing, right? And we ask guys, what is your slip report? Where are you at in your progress? And for those reasons, people do this in AA and NA, whether it's drinking, drugging, or, SA. Basically, we want to know how we're doing. There are some limitations, though, with the metric of clean time. One of the challenges with using that metric or that metric only is this idea. Most of us don't do recovery perfectly. There are often relapses along the way. And when we do relapse, basically, if you're just using the clean time, metric, then you essentially are having to start your clock all over again. Which kind of makes us feel like, I haven't gotten anywhere. Here I am starting over, which isn't really true, is it? Going back to my amazing running example, my amazing time, don't forget, 43:33. It would be like I tripped and fell somewhere along that 10K, and a bunch of guys in vests came and they grabbed me. They threw me in a van. They drove me back to the beginning of the 10K run, and they say, here, run it again. And they kept the time going, by the way, as well. I mean, that's a little bit sometimes what clean time or a relapse makes us feel like. We're not starting over in that scenario. So again, I think there's real limitations to that metric or only using that metric. I want to give you a few other possible metrics. They're not quite as objective, but I think we still can add some specificity to them that I think are also ones that we need to add to this idea of progress. Here is the first one, the connection metric. I mean, we all know that porn addiction at its core is an isolating thing. I never yet have had someone call me up and say, hey, come on over and let's watch porn. Now, I've had someone call me up and say, let's watch the Philadelphia Eagles, but that's another story. But no one's ever called me and invited me over to watch porn. Because porn takes us deeper and deeper into our isolation. And as we get into the isolation, deeper and deeper, we get more and more caught in this trap. So it kind of makes sense if porn takes us deeper and deeper into isolation, maybe we can chart progress in recovery by looking at the steps that we're taking to climb out of isolation. So, step by step, measurable step by step, we are becoming more known. We are becoming more open, more honest, more vulnerable with those around us. We're now learning to become comfortable, let's say, with a counselor or with a group of guys in recovery. We're learning to reach out when we're struggling and call somebody and say, hey, I'm just having a tough day. Step by step, we are becoming more and more connected. And you can measure that. Every time you make a connection, you can make note of that. I connected 3 times this week, 4 times this week. right? And that's something that we can track. That is progress. Remember where we started. How many people did we reach out to when we started? Nobody. In fact, when we started, nobody knew what was going on, what we're going through. And then we hesitantly reached out for the very, very first time. So look at where we've come from and look at where we are now. So you can chart that. And in my mind, the connection metric is a really good one in terms of charting your recovery progress. Now, here's another one, the emotions metric. Now, most guys have a very little idea about what they're feeling. It's funny, sometimes the first time I show guys a feeling chart or a feeling wheel, they go, "What's this?" Some of the guys think I only ever had 3 emotions: angry, horny, or hungry. Is there more? There's a whole page of emotions. Oh my goodness. I'm overwhelmed. And the point here is that most guys are very often unaware of the emotions that they're experiencing. They usually don't identify, right now I am going through this situation. Right now I'm in the middle of experiencing this emotion. I mean, it happened to me 2 days ago. My wife came back and she gave me some news about a family struggle that we're going through that's going to cost probably a big chunk of money. And I just was incredibly agitated. I was anxious. I was in a place where I felt overwhelmed, and I just sat in it. It was just like, wow. It totally ruined the mood for anything, trust me. And but I was aware of it. That's what I'm experiencing right now. So that's the first thing. You become, and you can chart emotions each and every day. You become better. You progress. You progress in terms of understanding your emotions. And then what you do, the second part of that, is you begin to understand, okay, what is the things and how are those emotions now triggering me towards porn? I mean, in the past, I just had these emotions that I often wasn't even aware of, and then I just run to porn as my favorite pacifier. And now I can actually chart those emotions on a daily basis and see how they're relating to my struggle with porn. And I can relearn how to deal with those emotions and move towards them rather than running away from them. You see, that's progress. And that's something with a little bit of creativity you can chart. Now, here's another one. I'm going to call this the threat matrix. I never saw myself as a counselor. I'm more of a coach, but as I work with guys, I've got more and more interest in the various ways that trained counselors work with people, because stuff just comes up, and I'm often good at saying, hey, there's some trauma stuff here. There's something, this would be great for you to go take this issue to a trained counselor and chew on it with them and have them help you through this. That's something I do on a regular basis. But in my reading, I've recently been learning some material out of cognitive behavior therapy. And it's causing me to rethink one aspect of my recovery approach. And here it is. You see, whenever I get together with guys, we do a fast check-in. And in the fast check-in, what we're doing is we're talking about our feelings. That's the F. We're talking around our positive recovery actions. That's the A. We're talking about our sobriety or our slip reports. That's the S. And then we get to the T. And the T has to do with the threats which are coming up. And it's that last letter T, threats, which is kind of starting to come under my scrutiny. I'm kind of working it through because I don't necessarily like how I'm seeing it played out in some guys' posture to their recovery. Now, let me just say this. Yes, we do need to proactively look ahead at what's coming down the road so we can prepare ourselves successfully to navigate whatever it is that we need to deal with. Let's say it's Wednesday and you're in a group and your wife has just let you know, hey, by the way, I have an invitation. I'm gonna be off to see my sister. I'm leaving Friday night and I won't be back till Sunday, or it's planned. And you go, oh my goodness, that is a what? There's the T word. That is a threat. And now, in one sense, we broaden it a little bit to say, okay, if it's a threat, then what are the tools that you're going to need to use to make it through that threat? So let's say, for example, you put some time in and you plan out a little bit of the major blocks for that weekend. So, okay, Saturday night, we're having some guys come over to watch the game. I'm going to bookend each day. I'm going to go for a run in the morning. I'm going to have maybe somebody over Saturday night. And then maybe at the end of the day, I'll text somebody or call somebody and just say, hey, going to bed. It's been a good day. Just so I end my day that way as a way of staying connected. That would go into my progress report under connections, right? So tools to combat threats. But there's also possibly a downside to the threat approach. And that's when I see with some guys are getting to a place where they're instinctively seeing threats everywhere. When you see your recovery as all about minimizing threats, then you begin to limit your life to such a degree that your goal is to avoid all threats. And it's even possible the more and more threat-focused we become, the more anxious we get, and the bigger those threats or those struggles become in our mind, and it actually makes it worse. The very thing we are trying to avoid, we're now obsessed with. At least that's some of the things I'm learning in cognitive behavioral therapy. So again, I'm working through this right now. Now, let me just clarify. I'm not talking about naively walking into situations that are over our heads, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I heard some guy says, well, I'm going to go and share my faith at the XXX convention. Well, you know what? That ain't going to be me. I'm sorry. That's not going to happen. Stuff like that, right? So give me a break. That's just stupidity, right? But here's the point. I don't want to see my whole life as a threat. And I think we can chart progress. So where's progress here? We can chart progress by saying, I am developing tools. One of those being, I am learning to reframe my understanding and learning to see those situations that I come into as a challenge or an opportunity to grow, as opposed to simply me running away from it or avoiding it at all costs. See, that for me is, back to the word, progress. Say you have young kids and your wife says, hey, I'd really like to go to the beach today. It's a hot day. Let's go to the beach. And you're going, oh, no, I don't do beaches. Beaches have skin. Beaches have water with skin. Beaches have certain types of bathing suits. No. Beaches are threats to me. Okay, and it could be in the early days of your recovery, that might be your approach. But for me, progress is where you say, you know what? Maybe talk it over with your wife and say, you know what? This is an opportunity for me to put into practice some of those tools that I am learning and begin to grow stronger. Now, it doesn't mean you have a good day and so the next day you simply on your own decide to go for a long walk on the beach. No, I'm not. That's just dumb, right? But you get the point. The point is you're growing in your ability to deal with threats and you're changing them into opportunities. Say there's somebody at work or somebody you see at church or whatever, and you go, oh, no, that person is a threat for me. That person fits my arousal template, and I'm going to avoid them at all costs. Okay, well, that's one way of approaching your recovery. Maybe that's a starting place, but I am talking about progress where you say, you know what? Maybe I'm going to get to a point where I actually go up and talk to that person or get to know that person as, you got it, a real person. where I see them as a real person, not as a sexual object or a threat, or somebody I need to avoid at all costs. For me, that is progress. So, what am I talking about? Again, I'm talking about reframing threats as challenges, and then reframing challenges as opportunities to grow. And for me, that's an example of something that looks like progress. Finally, the last one I want to talk about is, I'm going to borrow this from Craig Para. I'm going to call it the kicking ass metric. And Matt is a good buddy. Dob Sheets is a good buddy of mine, and he interviewed Craig Para recently on Porn Free Radio, and they talked about this concept of kicking ass and how it relates to recovery. And Craig had said, well, he said early on, I used to always say getting free from porn is 50% recovery work and 50% kicking ass in life. But I've since modified that, he said. I now see it as, I think the percentage he says, 20% recovery work and 80% kicking ass in life. So now I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but I'm going to take that and I'm going to apply that in my own way that brings this idea of progress into play. Early on in recovery, it's very possible that recovery work feels like it's taking up almost all of our time. It's all consuming. We are trying to break through these life-damaging, destructive cycles that we find ourselves caught in. It's like rarely a day that doesn't feel like a battle, or we don't have to aggressively follow all of the tools. Otherwise, we're not even going to make it through one day. Some people call that the crazies. And it feels like we're spending all of our time not acting out. So that's all recovery work. And I think it's legitimate to say early on that is the biggest focus of our life. But I think one way to measure progress is for us to ask, how well are we beginning to introduce that other thing of kicking ass in life? Craig makes an amazing quote in the rest of that podcast, and he says this: recovery is the aggressive pursuit of a better life. So you say, well, how do we measure progress? Well, as we become healthier, as we move along, there will always be recovery work. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a saying that says no matter how far you get down the road, the ditches are still the same distance away. Right? It's true. The ditches are always there. We never leave recovery work completely. But then we move towards aggressively pursuing a better life. It's 30, it's 40, it's 50, it's 60, 70, 80% of our lives are just going after the things that we value and what we feel our life is to be called to. For me, that's another way to measure how we're progressing in our recovery. So, those are all some different ways that I encourage you to think about, perhaps some different ways, in addition maybe to clean time. I'm not saying you can't hold on to that as a metric, but I'm giving you some different ways of perhaps measuring or thinking about your recovery. So here's to a better life. Here's to a great 10K record. 43:33. Let me know if you beat that. I'm sure there's ultra marathoners out there that would put me to shame. There's even marathoners out there. In fact, there's just 10K runners out there that would put me to shame. But let's leave that alone. Just want to encourage you to run with courage and continue to look at the progress you're making. God bless.